Outside, the hand of Mars was closing. As the slender filaments of the storm stretched towards the Arendra, microfilaments were emerging from the ship's own magnetosphere in response, reaching out to the storm, drawn to it as surely as the storm was now drawn to her. Her wake, once a smooth ribbon of unbroken light, had degenerated into an intermittent pulse, and effective propulsion was dropping fast. By the feel of the repeated lurching of the ship, some external force was attempting to invert the polarity of the flux tube, and almost succeeding every few seconds. It felt like Arendra was being clawed at from behind, dragging herself free by the narrowest margin each time. Yet in spite of all this, the sea in her immediate vicinity was deathly calm. No eddies, no debris, no strong currents. Redfast trusted his captain, but faced with the ire of a deity, any man would feel uncertain. The captain had a plan, but if his plan were to merely trust in Arendra's strong heart, for their escape to be effected through sheer brute force, what if the scientist were right? What if resistance were met with reprisal? What if Arendra's great strength proved her undoing, and what strength had she faced with that of Mars? The captain commanded, "Helm, ahead flank," and the helmsman pushed a lever all the way up. A dial changed accordingly, while somewhere deeper in the ship the engineers received the wordless order. The ship roared as power was forced into the thrumming and throbbing coils of the flux tube, and Arendra shook so hard that every man had to brace himself on whatever was near. But to the grim satisfaction of the captain, their tattered wake appeared to solidify into a steadier trail, for a time, and Redfast felt the ship accelerate. "That's it, old girl," the captain said softly, "just a little further." In that moment Redfast made eye contact with Langhurst, and both men knew what the other was thinking, and they both looked away, all at once ashamed and validated by their mutual doubts. On the monitors, those distant secondary filaments began to shift. Like a pack of predators poised to pounce, and sensing movement at last, they swept through the sea, shimmering and dancing with deceptive elegance and incredible speed, converging on the Arendra as one. As she accelerated, so too did they. He felt the hairs stand up on the back of his neck, and his gold fillings tingled. Somewhere far ahead of them, the vague strata of heat differentials could be seen, the reassuring density and turbulence of the rim visible in slow, swirling gradients. It was easier to see a distinction from out here in the shallows, easier to see how far you'd slipped from the edge of the charts. It was a strangely dreadful sight, like a falling man looking up at the edge of the cliff. There was awful certainty in such a sight. The captain checked his pocket watch, then put his hands behind his back, glancing casually at the monitors as if nothing were amiss. Catching Redfast's gaze and evidently reading him like a book, the old man asked, "You have served under me for how many years now, boy?" "More than 10, sir." "Yes. I remember when you came aboard. Spotty little turd, weren't you?" "Aye, Captain." "Seems like only yesterday to me." Langhurst guffawed. "And you, Langhurst, you'd go pink in the face at the mere mention of a woman's unmentionables, I seem to recall." Langhurst, who was relatively pale by Farron standards, promptly turned scarlet at the memory of turning scarlet. The captain smirked. "Look at Mars, my lads, both of you. Look him right in the eye." They did so. The storm was vast beyond comprehension. Arendra had faced many threats, and won many battles that lesser ships and lesser crews would surely have lost. But neither Redfast nor Langhurst had ever seen her contend with a god before. To them it was unprecedented and unpredictable, something that any sane sailor might hope to see once in a lifetime and never again. To Captain Avenstave it was evidently no more than the return of an old grudge, like two elderly men glowering at each other over the faded memory of the conflicted affections of a girl in their youth. "If you're afraid, you bloody well should be," said the captain, smiling at the apparent horror in their eyes. "I want you both to understand that what you'll shortly witness and hopefully survive is not a lesson of strategy or wits. It is not something for you to emulate or master. Mars is not a fear to be conquered, a challenge to be met, or an opportunity to be exploited. He is death. You may run from him, but you will never outrun him. At best, you can dodge him and face him another day." With that, he fell silent. Taking out his pocket watch once more, he studied it calmly. The control room had gone quiet now. There were no more orders to give, no more reports to receive. All that could be heard was the rattling and buzzing and clattering of the ship. Ahead flank was the word given, and Arendra struggled to keep it. But ahead flank they persisted, with the storm's meandering extremities in close pursuit. Redfast watched the captain, as did Langhurst. In fact, many of the sailors had now set their eyes upon Avenstave with concentrated looks of dread and desperate faith. All thought as one, "Blessed soul, let him be right. Let him be certain. Let him give the word that will save us. The ship lurched, a single jolt as the flux tube struggled to maintain its polarity under the force of the war god's invisible assault. The captain braced himself with a hand on the support above his head, and then he tucked his pocket watch away and raised the other hand aloft. All men stared at it, as if magic were about to leap from his fingertips. Outside, the grasping tendrils of flame had almost reached them. It was hard to judge size and thus distance, but they couldn't have been more than a kilometer away now. Another few seconds, perhaps, and they would close the gap and make contact with the magnetosphere, and then... And then what? No man knew, except perhaps the captain, for no ship survived closer encounters than this. The captain extended his index finger, as if waiting to begin a count. He closed his eyes. "Wait for it, lads," he said.